All right, Loft, it's great seeing you guys, and hope you're having a wonderful weekend, and so thrilled you're sharing part of it here with us. So you will recall that Jesus said, John chapter 10, I have come that they might have life and have it abundantly. The will of God is for us to thrive in every way that's really important. And that's what this series that we've been in is about, thrive. How can we thrive in the most important parts of our lives? And so far, we've looked at what makes a person thrive, what makes a marriage thrive, what makes a child thrive, and today we're going to talk about what makes a family thrive. Now, before I introduce our speaker, I want to tell you about next week. If you look in the bulletin, it says, what makes intimacy thrive? I want you to hear this for a couple of reasons. That's sex. What makes sex thrive in our marriages? And the reason I want you to know that is, one, I think it will increase the likelihood that many of the guys here will return next week. And secondly, because some of you bring kids to worship with you of all different ages. And I just want you to know this is what's coming up. And you know, whenever churches talk about sex, this is this wonderful, great gift. It was God's idea. It was a great idea. And we have two ways that we can kind of goof up on that. One is we can be so graphic that it's really kind of unseemly and inappropriate and not why people would come to church. But the other is not to talk about it in a way that's truly kind of open and comfortable and realistic. And so we're going to try to thread that needle and do it just right. But if you have kids, you may want to just factor that in. We have a great speaker coming. His name is Dr. Looney. He is a psychiatrist. Yes, that's right. We have a psychiatrist in the Woodlands named Dr. Looney. That's the honest truth. But he is a great, great, great guy. And he's going to be talking about this for us. And this is one of the areas that he specializes with as well. Well, today's speaker is Janet Nicholas. I'm so glad that she's here. She has been practicing in the area for the past 25 years. She's a licensed professional counselor. She's a licensed chemical dependency counselor. She specializes in equine therapy, helping people grow through interactions with horses, some of which you'll see on the screen before she's done, and donkeys as well. So if you think, I don't know if I need therapy or if I want to go to a rodeo, you can just go to Janet's and you don't have to choose between the two. I don't know that really helps you, Janet. I'm sorry. But Janet is one of the people that we regularly recommend our members, couples, families to go to see because we have such great respect for her and such great trust in the work that she does. So let's make her feel very comfortable as she comes up.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you. Do what?
It's not you, it's me. Have you ever heard that before? It's not you, it's me.
I say it all the time.
Text your questions. Man, I got 1 out of 3 right this weekend. I'm getting better. So y'all have been really good about sending questions to the phone, and the number is right on the screen. So as Janet talks, there are questions that you have, text it. Dr. Grant will get them when he interviews Janet in just a few minutes.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob. It's so good to be here. I love this church, and I want y'all to know, too, that Dr. Looney, you are really in for a treat next week. Dr. Looney is such a gifted speaker and psychiatrist, and he's like a Renaissance man. So you're in for a good one. And I tell you, I'm so glad that I get to go before he does, because he's awesome. You don't want to follow Dr. Looney. I'm really honored to be here today, and I'm super humbled because there are so many amazing speakers that you guys have had for this Thrive series, and there's going to be more to come, more amazing speakers. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to share with all of you today from some of my counseling experiences, but not only that, some of the research that's out there on Thrive and on what makes families thrive. As wonderful as family can be, let's face it, okay? Family can be complicated, true. But I wanted to start out with a definition of thrive, and I found this one. There's a bunch of them, but I like this one the best. It said to progress toward or realize a goal because of or in spite of circumstance and what we're going through. So that's really going to resonate what we're going to talk about today. Dr. Dan Siegel is a renowned psychiatrist, and he is one of the founders of the interpersonal neurobiology theory and approach. This guy is brilliant, and he's not a Christian, but he says some things that I think you'll find really interesting and that will sound a little bit familiar. He says that even in the earliest stages of development, he knows that we were made and created for connection. And he shows this by putting your fingertips together and your thumbs together. And he says that when the egg and sperm unite, something really interesting starts to happen. The ectoderm, which is the outer layer, begins slowly but surely to fold in as the inside of the cell starts to divide. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. And then as the thumbs come in, this represents the neural tube, which eventually will become our brain and our nervous system. And then it all comes together. And guess what he says? He says the two become one. Sounds really familiar, doesn't it? But I want to quote him directly. He says, this means that the very origins of our nervous system, the outer layer cells, reveals how our neurons were originally organized on the boundary between the inner and the outer and linking these two realms. He says, this means that we were hardwired for connection. Pretty cool, I think. So the more we understand about how important connection is within our own families and how to do that in a healing, healthy way, we're more able to create more of that thing that we're talking about today, which is thrive. Dr. Siegel also says that our level of attachment to our original caregivers is super important. He says that probably about a third of us had what he calls an insecure attachment. Some things happened in your early days and the early days of your youth that caused this insecure attachment. But here's what else the research says. The research says that we can actually earn security. And how we do that is by making sense of our story. He says that if we can develop some type of coherent narrative about what happened in those early years, that can actually affect our current family system and our family relationships in really positive ways. So that's a pretty awesome thing too. But he also talks about how what happens is that this integrates the past with the present and can even affect our future. And to me, that really is congruent with how Pastor Rob opened up this series about Thrive and talking about personal responsibility. But we can create a new and healthier, coherent narrative. But here's another dynamic that I've seen over many years of doing counseling when families come to see me or individuals come to see me, and that is developmental changes. And developmental changes can be awesome and wonderful and positive. Sometimes I call them life transitions. But I see people in my office every week that they come to see me and they don't even realize that they're going through one or that some of their family members are going through one. So, I mean, what's not more adorable than when there's a baby born into a family, a child, a grandchild, niece or nephew that's born, and they start to coo. They start to make eye contact. Those are beautiful developmental phases. You know, when they start to take their first steps or they graduate from kindergarten. Did anybody else cry when their kid or their grandkid graduated from kindergarten? I was like, my mother had these funny sayings, and my mother was German, so she did not cry a lot. I was the crier in the family. I cried when I was happy. I cried when I was sad. I cried if something was funny. She said, Janet, I honestly think your bladder is next to your tear ducts. I mean, what is wrong with you? She was always coming up with crazy sayings. So, but here's the thing. There's other different types of life transitions too that are maybe not so pleasant and very difficult. And it can be aging. It can be our parents getting ill. It can be retirement. It can be when our kids leave home. That's usually a big transition for most families and really hard. But when you have 2 or more family members that are going through a life transition, it can really get dicey at the same time. So these transitions, they can be physiological, they can be emotional, they can be social, and they can also be spiritual transitions that we're going through. Another great researcher and psychologist that I wanted to mention today is Dr. Martin Seligman. He is one of the founders of the positive psychology movement that's really only about 15 or 16 years old. And Dr. Seligman originally started his research on happiness, but he determined that happiness was such a subjective thing, to so many different people. So he decided to expand that out, and he started calling it, How Do You Flourish? And what does well-being look like? So that's where his research went. But interestingly enough, back in 2008, you're not going to believe who came to call on Dr. Seligman. It was the Army. The Army came to him and said, the top brass said, we have got problems. Our soldiers, we wanted physically fit soldiers, but we also want soldiers that are emotionally fit and resilient. And the Army was telling them, we've got suicides, we've got addiction, we've got family distress, all these multiple deployments and how they're affecting our servicemen and women and their families. And not to mention the traumas that all these soldiers were experiencing. And I want to take a pause here real quick to thank our military. For those of you who have served in the military, thank you so much. You in this room know how difficult it can be. And some of us will never experience that. So thank you. But they came up, Dr. Seligman got his team of researchers together, and they got some incredible people to come and create a specific training for the soldiers and for their families. And they called it Master Resilience Training. And there were 4 modules to it. There was the emotional fitness model, the social fitness model, the family fitness model, and wait for it. You're not going to believe what the 4th one was. The spiritual fitness model. And the Army, spiritual fitness model. So these were the 4 modules, and you're not going to believe this other part because you're not going to believe who they got to do the training. I'm thinking they're going to bring in the top trainers around the country. They chose the drill sergeants. Now you can only imagine what these drill sergeants thought when they heard they were going to have to teach emotional, social, family fitness, and spiritual, seriously. And they did. They all came in with arms crossed and just like, I cannot believe they're wasting our time with this. But a really interesting thing began to happen because the drill sergeants started seeing changes in themselves, and not only in themselves, but also within their own families. So a really cool thing happened. A drill sergeant called home, and he was going to implement some of his new skills that he had learned. So he called home, talked to his 8-year-old boy who had just gotten some kind of award at school. So he was asking his little boy, he said, well, what was that like? And, how did you feel when you got the award? And, who was there? And have you decided where you're going to hang it? And mid-conversation, his little boy stopped him and said, Dad, is this really you? The sergeant said they had never had that long of a conversation before. So right away, the drill sergeants could see the amazing things that were starting to come as a result. What Dr. Seligman noticed when they were looking at what was going on in the Army is that they were focusing too much on weakness and not appearing weak. Now, any of you who have been in the military or had, loved ones in the military, looking weak is not a good thing. So the soldiers were not coming and telling anybody that they were struggling. So there was too much focus on not appearing weak and also the traumas that they had experienced and the things that were going wrong. Dr. Seligman wanted to focus rather on post-traumatic growth. Now that's an interesting term, post-traumatic growth, because growth can come out of trauma and out of stressful situations. He also wanted to strengthen these families and their soldiers by giving them new tools and new skills. So it's really exciting to see that study that began in 2008, that it's ongoing. They started it in 2008, started the creation of it, and I think it was implemented in 2010. I actually got to hear Dr. Seligman report on this. And so it's changing things. And it's about time, and it's wonderful. I mean, they're changing things for our military. I hope they put it eventually in all the arms of the military. So it's really exciting. But guys, some of us will never experience what a soldier experiences at war, and thank goodness for that. So we cannot, many of us in this room cannot relate, but maybe some of you can because maybe some of you have been at war. But we live in the most amazing and beautiful community with so many, many resources. But guys, we have our things here too. We have a high rate of suicide here. We have addictions here. We have family discord. We have traumas that families experience and crises and illness and all sorts of things going on here too. So I'm not trying to compare ourselves to someone who's been at war, but we also cannot minimize what things happen here in our hometown. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to mention 5 themes, and somehow they all ended up starting with a C. This is also going to be posted on Facebook. But I wanted to mention 5 things that can make a difference in our ability to thrive, no matter what situation we're in and no matter what's going on in our lives. So we're going to start with connection, that connection word again. And to truly connect, that takes time. All right? That takes an intentional investment of time. If you're going to connect within your family, you've got to make the time investment. And I want to speak to married couples first, because this is a key point too. If you are a married couple in here, and this includes grandparents, which by the way, it's Grandparents' Day. Happy Grandparents' Day to all of you out there who are grandparents. Thank you for all that you do. But if you're a married couple in here, I don't care how long you've been married, you showing what a healthy marriage, like not a perfect marriage, showing what a healthy marriage looks like is an amazing gift to your children. And I am telling you, I have had people in my office that are teenagers, that are in their 30s, that are in their 40s, or their 50s, or their 60s, and they can tell me who had a good marriage in their family. People are watching. If you are not married and you're an aunt or an uncle, a niece, a nephew, a cousin, people are watching in your family. You can role model what a healthy person looks like. And if you're a single parent, same thing. Role modeling healthy behaviors and how to do healthy self-care and not let things get out of balance to where you're a completely child-centered or teenager-focused home. It's easy for that to happen because we love our kids so much. So the other thing is creating meaningful rituals. It's really important to create meaningful rituals, not just during the holidays, but during the week. And guys, it's got to be something that people buy into. Your family's got to buy into it. So look for ways that you can create meaningful rituals. When we're going through the really tough times, it's an anchor. When we're going through the really tough times, it's a wonderful thing to come home weekly to these rituals. Also, technology. Let's face it, technology is here to stay, and technology has afforded us many wonderful things. But we can all be more mindful about putting our technology down and really making a connection with each other. I encourage families to think about and to practice not a perfect house, not a perfect place, but one that is emotionally and spiritually fit. Because the adults in the family, the children and teens in the family, we are all having to deal with unhealthy things that come along our week, every week. Let your home become a safe haven for your family to come home to and for people to visit. They'll feel it, trust me. Community, this is another C. Community is so important. Guys, this church is a community. Did you just hear all the wonderful things that they're doing? Not only are y'all going out in the community, you're having the community come in. This thing for the homeless people, that is awesome. So we have got to get out of our little homes and our little family situation and get out there and help people and figure out ways to serve. It is so vital and so important. And our children and teenagers need to see it, and our children and teenagers need to participate. They need to see what other people are going through and how they can help. It creates a serve mentality for all of us. And when you get to that point, when you need the help, be ready to accept it. It's hard to do. Sometimes that's really hard to do. We went through a lot 5 years ago, my husband and I. It was year 30 of our marriage. We'll be married 35 years in November. But we went through one crisis after another over a 3-year period. And we had to be on the receiving end of some of that help at that time. Before Harvey, there was Ike. Was anybody here during Ike? We were here. And so totally different storm, and maybe some of you are still suffering the reverberations of Harvey. But before Harvey, there was Ike. We saw an incredible community outpouring and really a nationwide outpouring to come and help our community when we all were experiencing Harvey down here. But September the 13th, 2008, there was Ike. And what was different about this storm, yes, it caused damage, but the power was out. Does everybody remember that? For 2 and 3 weeks at a time. And so my office, I guess it was on the hospital corridor because we had power. So my clients were still coming in for their sessions. And I accused them. I said, you're not here for a session. You're here for my plug. I know what you're here for. But they came in and talked about stuff anyway, so we got a good laugh out of that. You would not believe the stories that I heard. People were coming out of their houses. The guys were coming out with their chainsaws, with their tools, and cleaning up the neighborhood. The kids and the teenagers were outside playing because there was no power. Everything had ran down on technology. And everybody was having block parties because a lot of people had to empty their freezers. The food was going to go bad, so everybody was eating together. People told me that they met neighbors. They had no clue. They'd never met them before, and they said it was absolutely wonderful. And it was very interesting. After the power came back on, those same clients came back to my office and said they were really grieving. They were really sad because everybody kind of went back in their houses, the technology came back on, and things reverted back. So it's definitely something that we have to remember. We've got to work to keep that community going, even if it's in our own little neighborhood. Communication. Communication is another C. What we say and how we say it matters. It matters big. And I cannot tell you how many people I've had in my office that we've had to work on things that happened because there was miscommunication within a family, hurtful words that were said. What we say and how we say it matters. And the most foundational piece to communication is being a good listener. And I want to tell you, that's hard. It is really hard to listen without a filter on and without thinking, man, wait till they stop because I've got a lot to say to them about that, you know. So good. I'm glad I'm not the only one in here who's done that. So I wanted to tell y'all another little research story. Barbara Fredrickson, who is a colleague of Dr. Seligman's, she decided to check out positive versus negative words and how they affect people. They went into 60 companies, and they went into their business meetings, and they coded and counted how many positive words to how many negative words were said in each of these business meetings, and they came up with this thing called the Losato ratio. And here was the dividing factor, 2.9 to 1. Anything over 2.9, those companies were flourishing. They were doing amazing. Anything under that, the companies were suffering, and some of them were flat out failing. So how we say it, and you know, we can all probably take note from this and think about our own Losato ratio. And I have to say that it made me feel so much better because none of us are perfect. We can all work on this, but Dr. Seligman was out pulling weeds with his daughter one day, 14-year-old daughter, and he was fussing at her, hurry up and get more weeds. Come on, get busy. You're so slow. She said, Dad, you have a horrible Losato ratio. So that made me feel a lot better. Here are two statements that could be accountability questions before you're going to say something to someone within your family. And that is, will this heal? Will this heal? Now in Texan, that's a 2-syllable word, will this heal? But if you're not Texan, it's just will this heal? The long version of it is what I'm about to say or do, is it going to help or heal this situation, or is it going to hurt it? Two great accountability statements, and I think could definitely help all of our Losato ratios. Cooperation and change. Remember what Dr. Seligman said, that happiness can be very subjective. And with all the developmental changes and life transitions going on within any family, you know, sometimes happiness is just too subjective. Think about striving for cooperation in your family. And if you've ever tried to take a family photo, anybody ever tried to do that? Yeah. It can be very difficult. We tried this a year ago. Everybody was in town because our family's very spread out. So we had grandpa, parents, siblings, grandkids. We had 2 donkeys, 3 horses, 3 dogs, and a partridge in a pear tree, I think, showed up. And let me tell you, it took us quite a few times, and not everybody was happy about having to repose, but we did get it done. Consider looking at the strengths in your family, focusing on the strengths, just like they did in this study that they did with the Army that's ongoing. And here's a way that you can do it. You can go to, it's called Gallup Strengths, survey, it's $15. And it's something that you could consider and see how many in your family would be willing to take this strength test and start thinking about and pondering on the strengths within your family instead of some of those weaknesses. You can also go to the Action Signature Strengths Values Test. That's at AuthenticHappiness.org. That's Dr. Seligman's website. But we need to learn how to face those challenges when they come along our way. And sorting our way through this and making sense. I want to expand out what Dr. Siegel said. He said we need to make sense of our story. I think it's something that is valuable to do across the lifespan, is trying to make sense of our story, because I know that for me, sometimes things have not made sense. It's just not made sense. Why are these things happening? Why are they continuing to happen? So continuing to make a coherent narrative out of our life story can benefit us. And when you get to the place when you can share your story, check with someone and see if they want to hear it, because you will have a story to help increase someone else's thrive, and you'll be able to invest in their lives. Dr. Seligman taught the soldiers how to ask these two questions when they were going through the tough stuff. What did I learn from this situation, and what went well? The WWW, what went well? And we can even say for now, if you're going through stuff now, what am I learning from this situation now? So lastly, celebrate and practice gratitude. This is so important. And they taught the soldiers and their families how to hunt for the good. And is it not true that sometimes we have to hunt for the good in situations that we're going through that are super painful? Hunt for the good. And they also asked them to keep a 3 blessings a day journal. That's the soldiers and their families to start keeping a 3 blessings a day journal. That might be a cool ritual. If you don't already do that in your family, that might be a really neat ritual to do. I want to end with a story about a tree on our property. We moved out to our land about 15 years ago, and we planted this oak tree. I don't know if they have the picture up yet or not, but this tree is massive now. Look how big it is. And this tree is really important because I call it my processing tree. We sit under that tree and we process. It provides a lot of shade for my horses and for clients when they're coming out. And so just like it is in life, one day I'm walking out to go do a session and I look up and I'm like, my tree. Literally, 1/2 of the tree was brown. You see how big it is. 1/2 of that had completely turned brown, like overnight. We didn't know what had happened. And then when I looked closer, I noticed that there was a fine white web. And then when I looked even closer, there were bugs crawling all up underneath that web. I'm like, it's killing my tree. So I'm yelling at my husband, like, go get the bug spray, get the bug spray. So he goes and gets the bug spray, and he sprays it, he kills the bugs, and the web starts to disintegrate. And then I call 3 tree experts, and they all said the same thing. Don't kill those bugs, and don't bother the web, because that's actually protecting your tree. It's trying to kill the bad bugs. So it's like, oops. Sometimes it pays to call an expert before you start doing things. But they all said something stressed this tree out, and we had forgotten that we had actually put some weed killer. We had a nasty weed grow in our pasture, and it evidently got too close to the tree roots. But this guy told me the most interesting thing. I did not know this. Maybe y'all know this, but I didn't know that trees compartmentalize. When they get affected by something, they compartmentalize. They don't shut down that part of the tree, but they work on healing that side without affecting the other side that is flourishing. And I thought, wow, that is such a life metaphor. And because, guys, when we're going through hard times, it's just hard not to succumb to everything that we're going through. But maybe we can take a lesson from the tree and compartmentalize, not shut down, but keep working at healing those parts of us. He also taught us to prune the tree, fertilize it, how to prune it, and keep cutting back. And that's true, guys. Sometimes we need some pruning, and pruning can lead to new growth. So I just want you to know that no matter where you came from, no matter where you've been, no matter what you're going through now or what's to come, there is always a way through. There's always a way through, and you can thrive in spite of all of it. So today, I encourage you to take some inventory of your family tree. And you know what? If some of the things I've said here today you're already doing, affirm yourself. Pat yourselves on the back and say, hey, we're doing good. But maybe there's some things that you have not thought about or that you're not doing that you'd like to incorporate. And also, so affirm your WWW, what went well, what's going well. But I want you to know that small, consistent adjustments can make a tremendous difference. They really can, and they can increase your thrive. So I pray many blessings on you and your families and on the next leg of the journey. So thank you for having me.
Well, Janet, thank you so much. Thank you for what you do. It's a high calling.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you do for the community, for families. Your work is amazing. You've been so effective in what you do, so thank you very much. I have one question here pertaining to your equine and donkey kind of work with other people. It says,
Right.
does your work with donkeys help you in dealing with men in family relationships? It should. I don't get it, but no?
Well, let me shed a little equine light
Okay.
here. Donkeys are actually the smartest of the barnyard animals.
So there's a correlation between intelligence and stubbornness, is what you're saying, right?
I don't know, possibly.
Mr.
possibly.
Smarty Pants over there? Okay.
No, donkeys are really very smart, and
Yeah.
there's two things about donkeys. Some of you may know this if you've ever been in ranching. Donkeys are prey animals just like a horse are, but they are also predators. And they protect. They are amazing at protecting. I cannot tell you how many times I've had people come out, and when people are going through something hard, they actually will make a curve around. They'll make a circle. My two little donkeys will surround somebody who's going through something really tough.
Wow.
And they'll kill dogs, they'll kill a mountain lion, they'll kill a predator. That's why you see them out in pastures with cows. And
I wonder if they're allowed in the woodlands, backyards, things like that.
I don't know.
We should check that out. Let's go back to the tree and how trees compartmentalize. Men kind of compartmentalize things.
Yes.
We set things aside. We don't want to deal with that, and then it tends to fester. But we heal by connection, don't we?
We do. And this is what you have to do. I mean, you've got to remember, compartmentalizing, that tree did not shut down. It got busy at healing itself. And so that's what we have to do. Instead of going into shutdown mode, you've got to reach out. And like I was saying earlier, when it's your turn, you need to accept help from others. And nobody's going to know if you don't tell them.
Right.
So you've got to ask for it. And sometimes that is a hard thing for men. Women are usually a lot more prone to say, let's pray about this, let's get out there, let's do this, what can we do for you? But generally speaking, men don't want to appear weak.
So when a relationship is in just turmoil, the trauma that's going on, and divorce is trauma, of course.
Yes.
It's very traumatic for those going through it.
Right.
But there's still a need to connect. How do we get people to reconnect? How do we reconnect when we have a strained relationship like that?
Right.
Communication is the key.
Yes.
Listening is a start. What else?
Yes. Well, again, you've got to get involved in community. And sometimes going through something like a divorce is humiliating. I've been through it. It was many, many years ago. It was about 38 years ago. And Scott was married previously, so we've been through that. And that was one of the hardest things I know for me was to reach out. I didn't want anybody to know. We were Christians. We had a Christian marriage. It was humiliating. It was embarrassing. But when I started to reach out, that's when changes started to happen. And Stu, just to let you know a little bit about me, I was not a therapist then. I would not even speak up in Sunday school. So what you're seeing here today is post-traumatic growth. I can't even tell you, I would not speak in, if you would have told me that I was going to speak in public like this, I would have just rolled in the floor and laughed.
You wouldn't even lead in silent prayer, would you?
No, I would not lead in silent prayer either. I could say it wrong,
How about that? Well, sometimes when we have too many rules, and the Woodlands we can be very child-centered.
Yes.
And we can have too many rules.
Yes.
And that actually causes chaos.
It does.
And
It
when we
can.
don't have any rules, it causes anxiety.
Right.
Where's our balance?
Right. Well, you've got to find out what works for your family, because every family is different. You have all these different personalities, and every child is different, or every teenager is different. And again, it's looking at what developmental phase they are in, because the same kind of rules that you have for young children, you're not going to have for older children or for teenagers. Get educated on that. And if you need to go talk to someone to see if your rules are too rigid, to get some outside objectivity, do that. But yes, you're right. Too much and then if you don't have enough, it creates chaos.
I hear you. So one message that was texted in, we are newlyweds and we want to flourish, was the most important C word of the 7 you used today. What would you say is good to emphasize now, early in the marriage?
Yeah. What I would say is never lose your ability to communicate. And men and women communicate differently. And part of learning about your spouse is learning timing and how to say things. I mean, it's getting to know your spouse. So making sure that you never stop communicating is so vital, because when the hard times start to come along your way and you both start feeling some of this, it's easy just to go into shutdown mode and to shut the other person out, and to go back to some of the old things that we did before we were married to protect ourselves. But keep communicating.
Yeah. And let's talk about family rituals.
Okay.
So we have those seasonal rituals that we engage in with Christmas and Easter and a number of things like that, right?
Yes.
But what about those weekly rituals that are so necessary for good thriving in families?
Right. They're vital. Because when you have those, like I was saying earlier, they anchor a family in, so that when you come into hard times, they really help. But they can be things just as simple as, taking a child and, your teenager and saying, we're going to do a weekly Starbucks thing. Let's go to Starbucks and let's sit and talk. Let's put our phones away and let's just talk. How are you doing? What's going on? It can be something as simple as sitting on the back porch and, playing a card game. There's, it could be having, what I really encourage families to do is to have at least 3 to 4 meals a week together. I am telling you, people really underestimate the value of that.
Yes.
It's a time for everyone to come together, and some kids and teenagers will complain about it, but the ones who don't have it.
It's the number one trait of a healthy family, though, is that they'll sit down and have a meal together.
Yeah, and you can get creative. I know that when school starts and activities go, it's really hard to get everybody home at the same time. So get creative. Do a family breakfast. And on the weekends, you can do lunches. I mean, you can be creative where you fit in those 3 to 4 times. But I hear people in my office talk about how much they miss that.
Yeah. And you're able then to practice gratitude during those times. Big antidote against bitterness and the trauma of the past.
What went well?
And you can hunt for good, right?
Yeah, the 3 blessings a day. What were
During
your
those
3
times.
blessings? Tell me. Okay, it sounds like you had a really hard day at school, but we want to hear about that. But let's talk about, what did you learn from that situation? Incorporating some of those good questions too, because you want to affirm. You don't want to deny what's going on, but you also want to affirm the strengths.
Right. Well, I love that you're growth focused, that we should grow, that it fights the arrival mentality, it fights so many things. But when we're growth focused, and this is our last question, when we feel stuck and we're not experiencing that post-traumatic growth, that's really a good time to ask for help, isn't it?
Absolutely.
To come seek you out, another professional. And,
Absolutely.
But mostly you, right?
Do what?
To come seek you out for help.
Yes.
Maybe another professional, but mostly you.
Yeah. Right. But, sometimes, too, people have great resources. They have friends with wisdom.
Yeah.
Our older generation and our family have incredible wisdom. They have lived through a lot of things, and we need to reach out to them when it's appropriate. So seeing a professional, our friends that have maturity and wisdom and that can give us good direction, but also reaching out and letting people know that we're struggling, that we're hurting, that we're stuck. No one's going to know if we don't say it. And it's actually a sign of strength.
Right.
To reach out and say, I'm really going through a struggle.
It really is. Well, Janet, thank you. We love you.
Oh, thank you, Stu.
Thank you so much for today. Let's show our
Stu.
hearts for you.
Thank you.
We have like 17 questions that came through. We'll post those on Facebook and try to address them. Let me pray for us. Almighty God, we thank you for the gift of love and family. We thank you for each other. We see at the very beginning of Scripture that you desired a family. And we see at the end of the Scripture that we are family forever. Help us to practice that now. Help us to reach out to each other. Help us to get over barriers and bitterness, and help us to truly love one another as you love us. In Christ's name, amen.